In the 91st year of the Fourth Age, when the kingdoms of men had grown mighty, and the memory of the Dark Lord had faded to whispered tales, there came a trembling in the very foundations of Arda. The Shire knew naught of it, save that the harvest mice fled their holes 3 days running. Yet in the halls of Minas Tirith, King Elisar felt the stirring of an old wound, and in Rivendell, Lord Elrond's sons spoke in hushed tones of dreams that came unbidden. It began with the finding of the Shard. Boromir the Younger, son of Faramir and nephew to the fallen captain of Gondor, had led his company deep into the Emyn Muil in pursuit of orc raiders from the east. There, amongst the grey stones where Gollum once hunted, they discovered a cleft in the earth that had not been there in all the years of their patrolling. From its depths came neither light nor sound, yet it drew them as flame draws the moth. "My lord," spoke Hurin the Bold, his lieutenant, "this chasm reeks of ancient malice. We should seal it and speak of it to none." But Boromir was of the blood of Denethor, and curiosity burned fierce in that lineage. Down into the darkness he descended, torch in hand, until he came upon a chamber wrought in black stone. Upon a pedestal of unmarked granite lay a crystal shard, no larger than a man's thumb, yet within it danced a flame that cast no light upon the wall. The moment his fingers closed about it, Boromir the Younger heard a voice, soft as silk and sharp as winter wind. "The time of rekindling draws nigh. Seek ye the air of fire in the depths of Khazad-dûm." When his men drew him up from the depths, they found their captain much changed. His eyes held depths they had not possessed, and when he spoke, his words carried weight beyond their seeming. "We ride for Moria," said he, and though his men questioned, they could not gainsay him. Yet even as Boromir's company made ready to depart, the trembling reached other land. In Fangorn, the Ents ceased their endless murmuring, and Treebeard himself felt a stirring in the deep roots of the world. The eagles of the misty mountains took to flight without call or cause, circling endlessly above the Redhorn Pass. And in a tower long thought empty in the ruins of Isengard, a single flame flickered to life. The road to Moria was long and perilous, winding through the Dimrill Dale, where the shadows of the mountains fell cold and deep. Boromir's company rode hard, driven by a compulsion their captain could not name, yet dared not ignore. The Shard, wrapped in cloth and bound with silver wire, pulsed against his breast like a second heart. They were not the only ones drawn to the ancient dwarf city. From the Grey Havens came Círdan the shipwright, accompanied by a small company of elves, whose faces were grim with foreboding. From the halls of Erebor rode Gimli, son of Glóin, no longer young but still mighty in battle, leading a delegation of dwarves who had heard strange singing in the deep places of their mountain. And from paths unknown came one who named himself Valdris the Grey, a wizard whose staff was carved from white ash and whose eyes held the memory of distant stars. Yet there was that about him which seemed familiar, though none could say why. "The Balrog is long dead," spoke Gimli, as the companies met at the west gate of Moria. "Gandalf the White saw to that. What evil could stir in halls we have cleansed and blessed?" "Not evil," replied Valdris, his voice carrying strange harmonics, "but nor good as we understand it. The flame imperishable takes many forms, Master Dwarf, and not all of them are gentle." Círdan studied the wizard with eyes that had looked upon the light of the two trees. "I know thee not, Grey One, yet thy words ring with truth. What seekest thou in the deeps of Khazad-dûm?" "The same as you all," Valdris replied, "the air of fire, whose awakening shall either save Middle-earth from a doom yet to come, or bring about its ending in flame eternal." The west gate opened at Gimli's word, for he had learned the old passwords from his father, and the three companies entered the halls of Moria together. Yet as they passed the threshold, each felt a weight settle upon their hearts, as though they walked not into stone halls, but into the pages of a tale whose ending had not yet been written. The shard upon Boromir's breast grew warm, and the voice whispered again, deeper, ever deeper, where Durin's folk delved too greedily and too deep. 7 days they wandered in the halls of Moria, following passages that grew ever stranger as they descended. The dwarves had cleansed much of the upper levels, but in the deep places, shadows still held sway. Here the very walls seemed to breathe, and the echo of their footsteps came back chained, speaking words in languages that predated the music of the Ainur. Valdris walked always at the fore, his staff shedding a pale light that revealed carvings unlike any the dwarves had wrought. These were older, carved by hands that knew secrets the world had forgotten. "These marks," whispered Círdan, running his fingers along symbols that seemed to shift when observed directly. "They speak of the first music, of themes that Ilúvatar wove into the very foundation of Arda." "Aye," replied Valdris, "and of discordant notes that Melkor added, which were not destroyed, but merely sleeping." On the seventh day, they came to a vast cavern whose ceiling was lost in darkness. In its center stood a pillar of living flame, tall as a tower and bright as the sun, yet it gave off no heat. Around its base lay the bones of creatures that had never walked beneath sky or star, things that had been made rather than born, wrought by powers that sought to rival the Creator himself. And chained to the pillar with bonds of mithril and starlight was a figure that had once been fair beyond measure. Its hair fell like liquid gold to its feet, and its eyes were the deep blue of twilight skies. Yet its face bore the weight of ages uncounted, and when it spoke, reality itself seemed to tremble. "So," it said, its voice like the singing of crystal bells, "someone has found my shard. I had begun to think none would come ere the world's ending." Boromir stepped forward, though every instinct screamed at him to flee. The shard burned against his chest like ice and fire combined. "Who art thou, fair one? And what manner of prison is this?" A smile touched the being's lips, beautiful and terrible as the breaking of dawn. "I am she who was once called Arion, herald of the sun, and this is no prison, brave mortal, but a sanctuary. For I am the last guardian of the flame imperishable in Middle-earth, and I have waited here since the First Age for one worthy to take up my burden." In the silence that followed Arion's word, the very air seemed to crystallize with power. Círdan fell to one knee, for he alone among them knew the true import of what stood before them. The others, mortal and dwarf alike, felt only an overwhelming sense of something vast and ancient, like standing at the foot of a mountain whose peak was lost in clouds. "Impossible," breathed Valdris, yet his voice held no conviction. "Arion departed Middle-earth ere the Second Age began. All the mire of light followed their kindred into the west. The herald of the sun laughed, and the sound was like silver bells ringing across water. All save one gray wizard, for I was given a charge by Manwë himself to remain until the dark flame should be rekindled, and the final choice between light and shadow be made." She gestured to the pillar of flame that held her bound. "This is no mere fire, but a fragment of the flame imperishable itself, that which gives life to all things. When Melkor was cast down, and the Valar withdrew their might from Middle-earth, they left this ember burning, hidden in the deepest places, waiting for the hour of greatest need." "What need?" asked Gimli, his axe hand twitching, though he knew not why. "Sauron is defeated, the Nazgûl destroyed. What shadow could threaten us now?" Arion's eyes grew distant, seeing beyond the confines of the cavern. "Look you beyond the eastern borders, Master Dwarf. Even now, in lands your maps name not, something stirs that makes the Dark Lord seem as a candle flame before the sun. The void itself grows hungry, and that which was bound at the making of the world seeks to break free." Boromir felt the shard pulse against his skin, and suddenly he knew why he had been drawn to this place. "The choice," he whispered. "It falls to me, does it not, to take up this burden?" "Nay," replied Arion, and her voice held both sorrow and hope. "The choice is greater than one man can bear. Look around you, an elf lord who has sailed the straight road, a dwarf warrior who has gazed upon the undying land, a mortal prince of noble lineage, and a wizard whose nature is not what it appears. Each of you bears a part of the choice that must be made. Valdris stepped forward, his staff glowing brighter. Then speak plainly, herald of the sun. What must we do? The flame imperishable can be kindled in two ways, Arian replied, as a light to shield Middle-earth from the coming darkness, or as a weapon to burn away all shadow, and all that casts shadow. The choice will reshape the very nature of reality. Choose wrongly, and you may preserve this world only to destroy its soul. For 3 days and nights they remained in the flame-lit cavern, each wrestling with the weight of choice that Arian had laid upon them. The herald of the sun spoke of the coming darkness, of entities from the void that had been gnawing at the borders of reality since the music first began, of the slow weakening of the barriers between what was and what should never be. In the uttermost east, she said, beyond even the sight of the eagles, the unnamed things gather. They are not of Melkor's making, but older, remnants of the discord that existed before discord had meaning. They seek to unmake the music itself, to return all things to the silence that preceded creation. Círdan, who had seen the passing of ages, spoke little, but watched much. In Valdris, he sensed something familiar yet hidden, a power that bent light around itself like a cloak. The wizard's knowledge seemed too vast for any of the Astari, and his eyes held depths that belonged to no servant. Gimli had grown quiet, his warrior's heart troubled by implications he could not fully grasp. If these unnamed things are so mighty, he asked on the third day, what hope have we? We are few, and the world has grown peaceful. There are no armies of the like that march to the Black Gate. Peace, replied Arian, can make folk strong or weak, depending on how it is used. Your people have grown in wisdom and craft, Master Gimli, but they have also grown comfortable. The fire that burns in times of great peril has been banked to mere embers. It was Boromir who asked the question that haunted them all. If we kindle the flame as a weapon, what would be lost? Arian's beautiful face grew sorrowful. Everything that has darkness in it would burn away. The shadows under trees, the quiet places where secrets are kept, the gentle mysteries that make life more than mere existence. Middle-earth would become a place of eternal noon, where all is seen and nothing is hidden. It would be safe, but it would no longer be free. And if we kindle it as a shield, the light would be gentler, preserving the balance between light and shadow that Ilúvatar intended. But it would not be strong enough to destroy the unnamed things utterly. They would be held at bay, but the war would continue, age after age, until the ending of the world. Valdris leaned upon his staff, his gray robes stirring in the flame-lit air. There is a third choice, he said quietly. One you have not spoken, Lady of the Sun. Arian turned to him, her eyes sharp as starlight. And what choice is that? O wizard, who is no wizard. The moment stretched taut as a bowstring drawn to breaking. Valdris straightened, and as he did, shadows fell away from him like cast-off garments. The gray of his robes deepened to black, then shifted to white, brighter than fresh snow. His staff blazed with sudden fire, and his eyes became as stars seen through clear water. I am not what I have seemed, he said, his voice carrying harmonics that made the very stones sing in response. I am Valdris indeed, but not of the order of the Astari. I am of the Ainur, a Maya who never departed from Middle-earth, because I was never sent here by the Valar. Círdan gasped, recognition dawning in his ancient eyes. Impossible. You are. I am he who was cast down with Melkor in the beginning. Valdris said simply, I am one of those who chose discord over harmony, shadow over light. I am what your stories call a fallen Maya. Gimli's axe was in his hands before the words had fully left the being's lips, but Valdris raised his staff in a gesture of peace. Hold, Master Dwarf, I come not as enemy, but as penitent. For 9,000 years I have walked Middle-earth in exile, seeking to undo the harm my choices caused. You would have us trust one of Melkor's servants? Boromir's hand moved to his sword, though the shard upon his breast had grown cold as winter stone. Listen to my words, Valdris replied. The third choice is this. to let the flame imperishable return to its source, to surrender it back to Iluvatar himself. By doing so, we would restore the music to its original harmony, healing the discord that has plagued Arda since the first notes were sung. Arian's chains rang as she stirred, her eyes wide with something that might have been hope or horror. That would mean the ending of the Fourth Age, and all that comes after, Valdris confirmed. Middle-earth would pass away, not in fire or darkness, but in completion. The straight road would open for all folk, not just the elves. Arda would be remade as it was meant to be before the shadow fell upon it. "And what of those who are not ready?" asked Círdan. "What of mortals who have not lived their full span? Of works left unfinished? Of songs yet unsung?" Valdris smiled, and for the first time, there was true warmth in the expression. They would continue in the new song, but freed from the constraints that discord has placed upon them. Death would lose its sting, for all would know it to be but a door to greater life. The cavern fell silent, save for the crackling of the eternal flame. Each of them felt the weight of the choice that had been laid upon them, not merely for themselves, but for all the peoples of Middle-earth and all the generations yet unborn. 7 days they debated, while the flame imperishable burned between them, its light revealing truths that daylight could not show. Each path seemed fraught with peril, each choice pregnant with consequences that stretched beyond the ending of the world. Círdan spoke for the wisdom of ages. To kindle the flame as a shield would preserve the world as we know it, with all its beauty and mystery intact. Yet it would condemn future generations to fight the same battle we now face, again and again, until the stars themselves grow cold. Gimli's voice rang with the strength of mountain stone. "Better to burn away the shadows entirely than to leave our children defenseless against the dark. What use is mystery if it breeds monsters? What good is gentle darkness if it hides the tools of our destruction?" But it was young Boromir whose words carried the greatest weight, for the Shard had shown him visions of what each path would bring. "I have seen the world reborn," he said. "In Valdris's choice, I have seen a place where elves and men walk together under stars that never set, where the very mountains sing with joy. Yet I have also seen the price, the ending of all we have known and loved, the dissolution of bonds forged in struggle and strengthened by loss." Arian listened to them all, her ancient heart heavy with the burden of choice. As herald of the sun, she alone could kindle the flame, yet she could not choose how it would burn. That choice belonged to the free peoples of Middle-earth, represented by these 4 who had come to her in the deep places. "There is yet another factor," she said at last. "Time grows short. Even now, the barriers weaken. The unnamed things probe the borders of reality, seeking cracks through which to enter. We must choose within 3 days, or the choice will be made for us." That night, as they rested in the flame's glow, each was visited by dreams that seemed more real than waking. Boromir saw his father Faramir grown old and gray, blessing grandchildren who bore the light of hope in their eyes. Círdan dreamed of ships returning from the west, bearing tidings of joy that would heal all sorrows. Gimli saw the halls of Khazad-dûm restored to their former glory, filled with the sound of hammers and the laughter of children. And Valdris dreamed of standing once more in the presence of Iluvatar, hearing the words he had longed to hear for 9 millennia. "Well done, good and faithful servant. Enter into the joy prepared for thee." But in each dream came also the shadow of what would be lost, the small joys and quiet sorrows that made life precious, the struggles that gave victory meaning, the very mortality that made each moment shine like gold. When they woke, they found that Arian's chains had grown bright as silver fire, and the pillar of flame pulsed with the rhythm of a great heart. The time of choice was upon them. On the final day, as the flame imperishable burned with increasing intensity, a sound reached them from the world above, the distant clash of arms and the cries of battle. The servants of the unnamed things had found other paths into Middle-earth, and even now darkness crept across the lands like spilled ink. The choice can wait no longer. Arian declared, her voice carrying the authority of ages. Speak now, representatives of the free people. How shall the flame be kindled? Círdan rose first, his white hair shining in the flame light. I have sailed the straight road and walked in the light of the two trees. I have seen what lies beyond the circles of the world, and I say, let the flame burn as a shield. Preserve the world we know, with all its imperfections, for it is good. Gimli hefted his axe, his eyes bright with determination. I have delved in the deepest places and fought the servants of darkness. I say, let the flame burn as a weapon. Cleanse the world of shadow, that our children might walk in safety under eternal light. Boromir touched the shard at his breast, feeling its power pulse through him. I have seen the visions of what might be, and my heart is torn. Yet I choose the harder path. Let the flame return to its source. Let the song be healed, though it means the ending of all we have known. All eyes turned to Valdris, who stood with his staff planted before him, like a tree that had grown from the very stone. The fallen Maya's face was grave as mountain stone, yet peace shone from his eyes like stars. I have spent 9,000 years seeking redemption, he said. I have seen the harm that comes from choosing the easy path over the right one. I cast my voice with Boromir the Younger. Let the flame return. Let the music be whole. Arian nodded slowly, though tears like liquid diamonds fell from her eyes. The choice is made. 2 voices for preservation, 2 for transformation. By the laws that govern all things, the choice falls to the one who bears the key. She looked to Boromir, whose hand instinctively moved to the shard. The decision is yours alone, young prince. Choose wisely, for all the world hangs in the balance. But even as Boromir opened his mouth to speak, a new voice rang through the cavern, a voice they all knew, though they had thought never to hear it again in Middle-earth. Hold, friends. The choice need not be made thus. From the shadows at the cavern's edge stepped a figure that had not walked Middle-earth for decades, tall and gray, with a pointed hat and a staff of ash. His eyes bright as stars under shaggy brows. Gandalf the Grey looked exactly as he had in the days of the Fellowship, save that now he bore about him an aura of completion, as though some long labor had at last been finished. "Mithrandir," gasped Círdan, "but you sailed into the west with the ring-bearers. How comes it that you walk again in these halls?" The Grey Pilgrim smiled, the expression lighting his weathered face. "I have returned because the Valar themselves have need of what transpires here. The choice you face is greater than you know, for it touches not only Middle-earth, but all the circles of creation." He moved to stand beside the pillar of flame, and Arian's chains sang like crystal in wind. Long ago, when the music was first sung, a single note went unrecorded, not from discord, but from an absent. It was the note that would have been sung by those who chose to fall with Melkor, had they chosen instead to seek redemption. Valdris staggered as understanding dawned. The missing harmony. "Just so," Gandalf nodded. "You, who were cast down, represent that unsung note. Your choice to seek redemption across the ages has created a new possibility, a fourth path that none foresaw." Ooh, the Grey Pilgrim turned to address them all. "The flame imperishable can indeed be kindled in 3 ways, as Arian has said. But there is a 4th kindling, not to burn as shield or weapon, not to return to its source unchanged, but to be transformed by the very redemption that brought you here, Valdris. The flame can be made to sing the missing note." "And what would that accomplish?" asked Boromir, his heart racing with hope he dared not name. "It would heal the discord without ending the song," Gandalf replied. "Middle-earth would continue, but the shadows that breed monsters would be cleansed. Death would remain, but as a doorway to joy rather than an ending. The free peoples would have their struggles still, but never again would they face ultimate despair." Arian's eyes widened as she grasped the implications. The barriers between the seen and unseen would be strengthened, but not closed. Magic would remain, but twisted to no evil purpose. It would be. She paused, searching for words. It would be the world, as it should have been, had no discord ever entered the music. Yet even as hope bloomed in their hearts, Gandalf's expression grew grave. Such healing comes not without price. To sing the missing note, one who fell must rise again. But the rising requires a sacrifice that cannot be undone. Valdris stepped forward, understanding dawning in his star-bright eyes. The sacrifice is mine to make. I who chose discord must choose harmony, not merely in word but in essence. I must surrender my very being to become the note that was never sung. More than that, Gandalf said gently, you must take upon yourself all the discord that has ever been, every shadow that has fallen across Middle-earth, every evil thought that has darkened hearts, every wound that malice has inflicted. You must bear it all, transform it all, and in doing so, be consumed utterly. The cavern fell silent, save for the crackling of the eternal flame. They all understood now what the fourth path would require: the complete annihilation of one who had spent 9 millennia seeking redemption, all to heal a wound that had festered since the beginning of days. Yet, Gandalf continued, his voice carrying infinite compassion, such a sacrifice would not go unrewarded. Though Valdris would cease to be as he is, his essence would become woven into the very foundation of the healed world. Every sunrise would carry his joy, every song would echo his harmony, every act of kindness would bear his signature. He would not survive, but he would never truly be gone. Valdris smiled, and for the first time in their acquaintance the expression held no shadow of sorrow. Then the choice is simple. I have wandered long in exile, seeking to undo the harm my rebellion caused. If my destruction can heal the world, then I embrace it gladly. But Boromir raised his hand, the shard burning bright against his palm. Hold, if this fourth path is possible, should not the choice still be made by all? We came here as representatives of the free peoples. Should we not consider all paths before deciding? Círdan bowed his head in thought. After long moments, he spoke. The elf lord in me says preserve the world as it is, with all its beauty and mystery. But the heart that has seen too much sorrow says heal it, whatever the cost. Gimli's voice was rough with emotion. I have fought beside heroes and seen friends die for causes less worthy than this. If one who was enemy can become redeemer, then let him do so with honor. All eyes turned to Arianne, she who had the power to kindle the flame in whatever manner they chose. The herald of the sun looked long upon Valdris, seeing in him something that perhaps only she could recognize, the echo of the light that had existed in all the Ainur before any chose to fall. The choice is made, she said at last. Let the flame be kindled to sing the missing note. Let discord become harmony, though it cost us one who has become dear. As Arianne spoke the words of kindling, the chains that bound her dissolved like mist before the dawn. She rose from where she had knelt for uncounted years, her form blazing with the light of creation itself. The pillar of flame responded to her call, growing brighter and more intense until it seemed a fragment of the sun had fallen into the deeps of the earth. Valdris stepped forward without hesitation, though each step carried him closer to his own dissolution. As he approached the flame imperishable, his form began to change, the appearance of an aged wizard falling away like discarded clothes, revealing the true shape of a Maya in all his fallen glory. He was beautiful and terrible, wreathed in shadows that were not dark but deep, like the color of twilight skies or wine-dark seas. Wings of starlight spread from his shoulders, and his eyes held the memory of the music as it had been sung in the beginning. Yet for all his power and majesty, there was about him a humility that spoke of hard-won wisdom. I have one request, he said, his voice harmonizing with itself in impossible ways. Let my sacrifice not be forgotten, not for glory, but so that others who fall might know that redemption is possible, even for those who seem beyond all hope. Gandalf placed a gentle hand upon his shoulder. It shall be remembered, friend. The tale of Valdris the Redeemed shall be sung until the ending of day. Then Valdris stepped into the flame. What followed defied description in any tongue of Middle-earth. The fallen Maya did not burn but dissolved, his essence spreading through the fire like honey through water. As he did, a note began to sound, not heard but felt, resonating through every stone of the mountain, every grain of earth, every drop of water in all the world. It was a note of perfect harmony, bridging the gap between creation and chaos, between light and shadow, between what was and what should have been. As it swelled, reality itself seemed to shiver and reform, not ending, but being purified, like gold tested in fire. The shadows in the deep places of the earth grew gentle, becoming mysteries rather than threats. The unnamed things beyond the borders of the world found themselves unable to breach barriers that had been strengthened not by force, but by healing. Throughout Middle-earth, those touched by malice felt ancient hurts begin to mend. In the Shire, the harvests grew more abundant. In Gondor, the white tree burst into bloom with flowers that shone like stars. In the halls of Erebor, the gold seemed to sing with inner light. Even in far Mordor, green things began to grow among the ashes. And in the depths of Khazad-dûm, 4 witnesses watched as the flame imperishable completed its transformation, becoming something new, not shield or sword or returning ember, but a beacon of hope that would burn until the world's ending, powered by the willing sacrifice of one who had chosen love over pride. When they emerged from the depths of Moria, the world above seemed transformed. The sun shone with cleaner light, the air tasted of hope, and even the stones seemed to sing with quiet joy. The armies of darkness that had gathered at the borders of the known lands were retreating, not in defeat, but in confusion, for the malice that had driven them was being slowly transformed into something else. Boromir looked upon the shard that had started their quest and found it changed, no longer a fragment of alien power, but a simple crystal that caught and reflected the light beautifully. "It is finished," he said wonderingly. "Nay," replied Gandalf, his eyes twinkling with familiar mirth. "It is begun. The 4th age ends, and the 5th age dawns, the age of healing, some will call it, when the wounds of the elder days are finally mended." Círdan gazed toward the west with eyes that no longer held the weight of endless years. "I feel the change in my very bone. The straight road remains, but it is no longer a path of exile. It has become a path of choice." "Aye," agreed Gimli, shouldering his axe with satisfaction. "There will be work to do, rebuilding and healing and setting things to rights. But good work, done in hope rather than desperate necessity." They rode forth from Moria as heralds of the new age, carrying word of what had transpired to all the corners of Middle-earth. The tale of Valdris the Redeemed spread like wildfire, bringing comfort to those who had thought themselves beyond forgiveness and hope to those who had despaired of change. In the years that followed, the world bloomed as it had not since the elder days. The barriers between peoples began to break down as the fundamental hostility that had driven them apart was healed at its source. Elves walked openly in the lands of men, dwarves shared their craft secrets freely, and even the orcs began to change, their malice slowly transforming into something that might one day become nobility. Yet for all the healing, the world remained recognizably itself. Death still came to mortals, but it was no longer feared as an ending. Struggles still arose, but they were the struggles of growth rather than mere survival. Shadows still fell, but they were natural shadows that gave meaning to light rather than twisted mockeries that devoured it. And in the halls of Khazad-dûm, where the flame imperishable burned eternal, pilgrims came to remember the price of redemption and to kindle hope in their own hearts. For they knew that if one so fallen could rise again, then none were beyond the reach of grace. Thus ended the 4th age and began the 5th, in which the song of creation was made whole at last, and Middle-earth entered into the long peace that would endure until the ending of all things. And though Valdris the Grey was no more, his sacrifice lived on in every sunrise, every act of kindness, and every heart that chose love over fear. The dark flame had been rekindled indeed, not as destroyer, but as healer, lighting the way to a future bright with hope. Here ends the tale of the dark flame rekindled, as it was told in the halls of kings and sung by wandering minstrels in the days when the world was young again. Epilogue: The Long Peace, being an account of the years that followed, as recorded in the Red Book of Westmarch and the Annals of the Kings, the first year of the Fifth Age. In the days immediately following the rekindling, as the learned came to call it, the world seemed to hold its breath. Messengers rode out from Minas Tirith, bearing word of what had transpired in the depths of Moria, yet many were slow to believe. How could one sacrifice, however noble, heal wounds that had festered since the music's first discord? Yet the signs were unmistakable. In Rivendell, Elladan and Elrohir reported that the ancient grief that had long clouded their father's halls had lifted like morning mist. The very stones seemed to sing with renewed joy, and the waters of the Bruinen ran clearer than they had since the elder days. Master Elrond himself, though he had sailed west decades before, was said to have sent word across the sundering seas that a great shadow had passed from his heart. In the Shire, the hobbits noticed subtler changes. Old Gaffer Gamgee, now in his 102nd year, declared that his back hadn't felt so spry since his 70th birthday. The malern tree that Sam had planted with Galadriel's gift grew with such vigor that it seemed to add an inch of girth each day. Children born in that year came into the world laughing, and their eyes held a clarity that spoke of minds unburdened by the weight of ancient sorrow. But perhaps the most remarkable change came in the lands that had long lain under shadow. In Mordor, where nothing good had grown since the Second Age, green shoots began to push through the volcanic ash. The former slaves of the Dark Lord, orcs and men alike, found themselves freed not merely from external bondage, but from the malice that had poisoned their very soul. Many wandered in confusion, like sleepers waking from nightmares they could only half remember. It was Boromir the Younger who proposed the great amnesty, speaking before the assembled lords of Gondor with words that carried the wisdom the Shard had granted him. If one who fell with the first discord could find redemption through sacrifice, who are we to deny that same hope to any who seek it? Let all who renounce their former allegiance to darkness be welcomed as brothers, that the healing might be complete. Not all agreed at first. There was much debate in the halls of power, for the wounds of war run deep, and many had lost loved ones to orc blades and the treachery of corrupted men. Yet King Elisar, himself touched by the change that had come upon the world, gave his royal assent. In this new age, he declared, we shall not be defined by what we were, but by what we choose to become. The fifth year of the Fifth Age. By the fifth year, the transformation had become undeniable even to the most skeptical. The first of the redeemed orcs, as they came to be called, had learned trades and craft, their natural strength and endurance making them valued workers in the rebuilding efforts. Some even showed aptitude for arts that had been thought beyond their race: music, poetry, and the growing of beautiful things. Ugluk, the Renewed, once a captain of Saruman's Uruk-hai, had become master stonemason of a new city being built in the former borders of Rohan. His works were marvels of both strength and beauty, and he spoke often of dreams that came to him in the deep hours of night. Dreams of building rather than destroying, of creating monuments that would outlast the ages. I remember the rage, he would say to any who asked of his former life. It burned in me like acid in my vein, driving me to acts I cannot bear to name. Yet now that rage has become something else, a fire still, but one that warms rather than consumes. I know not what magic has wrought this change, but I bless it daily. The elves, ever slow to trust, began to venture forth from their hidden realms in numbers not seen since the Second Age. Lady Galadriel herself, though she too had passed into the west, was said to have spoken through her mirror to the elves of Lothlorien, counseling them to embrace the new age with open hearts. Her words, as recorded by her handmaiden Nimrodel, were, "The doom of the Noldor is lifted, the shadow is healed." Go forth with joy, for the time of exile is ended. In Mirkwood, which had already begun to heal in the Fourth Age, the transformation was complete. No longer could it be called by its dark name, for light filtered through leaves that had not known such clarity since Orifer's day. King Thranduil renamed his realm the Golden Wood of the East, and threw open its borders to all who came in peace. Elvenhall, that had been empty for centuries, filled once more with laughter and song. The 10th year of the Fifth Age. The 10th year brought the first of what would come to be called the Great Journeys. Círdan, the shipwright, his heart lightened by the healing of the world, announced that ships would sail once more between Middle-earth and the undying land, not as vessels of exile, but as bridges between kindred. Many elves who had thought never to see their beloved West again wept with joy, while others chose to remain in the renewed Middle-earth, finding purpose in the great work of healing. Gimli, now Lord of Khazad-dûm, in truth as well as name, had overseen the complete restoration of the ancient dwarf realm. The halls that had long echoed with emptiness now rang with hammer and song. But more than this, he had instituted a radical change in dwarf culture. The doors of Moria stood open to all who came in friendship, elf and man, and even the redeemed alike. My father spoke often of the friendship between Durin's folk and the elven smiths of old, Gimli had declared at the opening ceremony. In this new age, let such friendship be renewed, that all the children of Ilúvatar might share in the wonders we create together. The most magnificent of these collaborative works was the Memorial of Valdres, carved into the very stone of the Chamber of the Flame. No mere statue. It was a living artwork that seemed to shift and change as the viewer moved around it, showing different aspects of the redeemed Maya's nature. Sometimes he appeared as the Grey Pilgrim, sometimes as the fallen angel seeking redemption, and sometimes as pure light made manifest. Beneath it, in letters of mithril and gold, were inscribed his final word: "Let my sacrifice not be forgotten, that others who fall might know that redemption is possible." Futid, the memorial became a place of pilgrimage, drawing visitors from across Middle-earth, and even from beyond the sea. Many who had lost their way found direction there, and those burdened by guilt found peace. It was said that no one could stand before the memorial unmoved, for it spoke to that part of every heart that yearned for redemption. The 25th year of the Fifth Age. A quarter century after the Rekindling, the world had settled into its new pattern. The generation born after the healing knew no other reality, and to them, the idea that orcs had once been creatures of malice seemed as distant as tales of dragons. They grew up playing with redeemed children, learning from elven teachers and crafting alongside dwarf masters, seeing such diversity as the natural order of things. Boromir the Younger, now a man in his prime and wed to Éowyn the Fair, daughter of Yomer King, had established the Order of the Rekindled Flame. This was not a military organization, but a fellowship of healers, teachers, and builders who traveled throughout Middle-earth, carrying the light of hope to places still touched by shadow. They wore no armor save compassion, carried no weapons save wisdom, yet their influence spread like ripple on a still pond. The Order's greatest triumph came in the 20th year, when they successfully negotiated peace between the Southrons and the Northmen, who had feuded since time immemorial. The ancient hatreds that had driven their conflict simply melted away when both sides truly listened to each other's stories, seeing for the first time how alike their hopes and fears truly were. In the old age, Boromir wrote in his chronicle, "We sought to defeat our enemy. In this new age, we seek to understand them, and in understanding, transform enmity into friendship." This is the true victory Valdres's sacrifice has given us, not the absence of conflict, but the presence of hope that all conflicts might be resolved through love rather than force. The Shire had become something of a legend in its own right, for the hobbits had embraced their role as keepers of memory and makers of peace. The mayor of Michel Delving was now chosen not from among the wealthiest families, but from those who showed the greatest gift for helping neighbors resolve their differences. Hobbit mediators traveled throughout the lands of men, their practical wisdom and gift for finding common ground, making them invaluable in the work of healing old wounds. The 50th year of the Fifth Age. On the 50th anniversary of the Rekindling, a great celebration was held in the restored city of Osgiliath, which had been rebuilt as a symbol of unity between all the peoples of Middle-earth. The city's architecture reflected this vision. Gondorian stonework adorned with elven artistry, strengthened by dwarf engineering, and beautified by gardens designed by hobbit horticulturists. Even the Redeemed had contributed, their natural strength and endurance making them master builders of the great bridges that spanned the Anduin. King Elisar, though advanced in years, stood before the assembled multitudes with Arwen at his side, their faces bearing the peace that comes to those who have seen their greatest dreams fulfilled. Behind them stood representatives of every people in Middle-earth, the elf lords of the renewed realms, Gimli, with his magnificent beard now silver-white, hobbit mayors with their bright waistcoats, and even a delegation of the Redeemed, led by Ugluk, the Renewed himself. But the place of honor was reserved for an empty chair, draped with cloth of silver and crowned with a wreath of Malorn leaves. This was the seat of Valdrith, maintained in every gathering as a reminder of the price of redemption and the hope it had purchased. As the sun set on that day of celebration, Gandalf the Grey spoke the words that had become traditional at such gatherings. "We are gathered here, not to celebrate victory over an enemy, but transformation of enmity itself. We remember not conquest, but sacrifice, not triumph, but love made manifest. May the flame that was rekindled continue to burn in our hearts until the ending of the world." And as his words faded, the great bells of Osgiliath began to ring, not in mourning, but in joy, their bronze voices carrying across the water and into the hearts of all who heard them. In that moment, all present felt the truth of what had been accomplished. The world was not merely healed, but transformed, made new by the willing sacrifice of one who had chosen love over pride. The 101st year of the Fifth Age. When the chroniclers of later ages wrote of the first century of the Fifth Age, they called it the Time of Wonder, for in those years, the full flowering of the healed world became manifest. Sciences and arts advanced at rates that would have seemed impossible in earlier times, as minds freed from the burden of ancient malice turned their full creativity toward understanding and beautifying creation. The Redeemed proved to have gifts that had been hidden beneath their former corruption. Some showed mastery of growing things that rivaled the elves. Others developed insights into the workings of stone and metal that impressed even the dwarves. A few even displayed talents that seemed almost mystical, the ability to sense the health of the land itself, to know where healing was most needed, to comfort creatures both wild and tame with a touch. Perhaps most remarkably, children born to mixed union, elf and man, dwarf and hobbit, even human and redeemed, seemed to inherit the best qualities of all their heritage line. These children, who came to be called the Healed Generation, showed abilities that transcended the traditional limitations of their bloodline. They lived longer than men, but aged more swiftly than elves, possessed the craftsmanship of dwarves, but also the practical wisdom of hobbits, and carried within them an innate understanding of the balance between light and shadow that made them natural peacemakers and healers. And still, in the deep places of Khazad-dûm, the flame imperishable burned eternal, no longer a fragment of distant creation, but a living symbol of hope reborn. Pilgrims continued to come, drawn by stories of healing and transformation, and few left unchanged. The flame had become more than light. It was a presence that spoke directly to the heart, reminding all who beheld it that no fall was too great, no shadow too deep, no heart too hardened to be touched by redemption. Thus ended the first century of the Fifth Age, with Middle-earth transformed beyond recognition, yet somehow more itself than it had ever been. A world where the song of creation played as it had been meant to from the beginning, unmarred by discord, unbroken by shadow, eternal in its hope, and infinite in its capacity for renewal and joy.